sewing friends. It's Erin Van Handel from Seamwork Sewing blog, and this week, this installment of Work in Progress is all about making underpants. As you're going to see in a couple of seconds, I started working on 3 different underpants patterns: the Seamwork Geneva, the Nielsen Acacia, and a pair of Simplicity underpants that are designed by Madalynne. And they're underway, they're cut out, and let's take a look at how all of this went down. It's time to make some underpants. We've got these high-waisted undies. It's a Madalynne Simplicity 8229. Going to work on Seamwork Geneva, which is one of their really early ones, and that's a low-rise bikini. And then Nielsen Acacia bikinis. I'm done taping together my underpants patterns for the Acacia and the Geneva undies. And I thought it would be interesting, I'll rotate my camera. I thought it would be interesting to kind of compare shapes. These are both bikini underwear patterns. I think the Geneva over here is going to be more low rise. I thought this was super interesting though. Like, look at the kind of curve in the back on the Acacia versus the curve on the back of the Geneva. I have a feeling that the Acacias are going to fit my butt better than the Genevas. I'm maybe a little bit concerned at this point that the Genevas would end up being wedgie prone. We shall see. And let's look at the front pieces. The Geneva over here and the Acacia. And let's get my camera here to focus. There we go. It looks like the front of the Geneva is a bit like wider in that dimension versus the Acacia. So I'm very interested in how this stuff is going to shake out. I haven't cut the Simplicity pattern yet, so I can't do a kind of a comparison, shape comparison there. Something cool of note is the Acacia is you cut flat versus cutting on the fold for the Geneva. When possible, I love cutting flat, so I'm very pleased about that development. And here's my pretty kitty, Lily. Hi, Lil. Hey, I'm actually fixin' to cut out pattern pieces for my undies. Because there are so few pieces and they're really small and it didn't take much to tape everything together, glue everything together. It's not really a big deal if I have a mistake and would need to print out the pattern again. So, got my X-Acto and I'm going to get this underway. Here are the 3 undie patterns cut out. There's a Simplicity Madalynne one, which is 8229. We've got Nielsen Acacia, which is only 3 pattern pieces, so that's pretty sweet. And then this is the Seamwork Geneva, which has more pattern pieces because there are, I believe, 3 views for it that involve like side panels. We'll look into that a little bit later. I'm hoping in the next day or two to be able to rifle through my stash of knits and pull out some appropriate underpants material. Going to buy some fold over elastic at my local Joann. I've never actually used fold over elastic. I'm going to turn and show you the other colors. So I'm going for these colors: black, like a turquoise, and a blue. In looking through my knit fabric stash, I have a lot of blue stuff. So here are the pattern pieces. I am fixing to cut out the panties in this fuchsia stripe. This is a bamboo knit that's super soft. I have a long sleeve Briar, Megan Nielsen Briar tee made out of this fabric. I think it'd be very comfortable as undies. And I want to make these basically muslins out of the same fabric, so it's a little easier to not let the fabric sway me as far as which pair I like best, because I totally would be vulnerable to picking something as my favorite because I like the fabric more. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of like, get my hand in the shot here, kind of like cut out like little chunks for each of the different patterns. So like this will be the Acacia chunk, this will be that Simplicity chunk, and then this will be the Seamwork Geneva kind of block. And then I'm going to cut the crotch gusset out of the scraps that are left over. Realized if I want to be a real boss about this, I am going to need to match the stripes on the sides. Although, as I'm looking at this, basically the only place where that's germane is on the sides, because this is just, these are your legs. Yeah. So maybe that's not that big of a deal. Follow up on that last comment about matching stripes. Because of the size of the fabric piece I'm working with here, this is like all the vertical I have for the front of the panties. So it's not like I can shift this around at all to, make sure it lines up with the sides. Like, this is where the pattern piece has to go. And that's it. Good morning. My bedhead and I are going to do some light pressing of the panty pattern pieces that I cut out last night. As you can see, they are pretty wrinkled. The fabric, when I cut them out, it was pretty crumpled up. And just giving them a light press will make it easier to sew them. I have learned the hard way about not having flat, unwrinkled pattern pieces. Don't be like me. Just give them a gentle press to get most of the funky wrinkles out. It's a hot tip from me to you. Okay, I hope you thought that was interesting, kind of looking at my process for how I am starting into making these patterns. I'm basically thinking about these 3 pairs of panties as muslins. I've never sewn panties before, and I want to make these pairs, kind of figure out which one I like best, and then I want to make like a whole bunch. Particularly, I think I want to make a bunch of like black and navy underpants. That's something that came up in my post about sewing for your period, just
such a simple idea, but why not just sew a bunch of black underpants for when you have your period? That way you don't have to worry about staining your underwear, which is something that happens to every single human being who menstruates. Like, hand to God, if you menstruate, you have wrecked underpants. Kind of a gross fact, but it happens. This is a human body experience. Okay, let's get into cool social postings for this installment of Work in Progress. The first cool thing you should know about is this very sweet and straightforward tutorial on block interfacing. She went through, over the course of like 8 or 9 photos in her Instagram, like all the steps for how to block interface a pattern. And block interfacing, in case you don't know, is when you take a piece of fabric and you fuse interfacing to that whole piece of fabric, and then from that piece of fabric that's pre-interfaced, you cut out fabric pattern pieces that need interfacing. And this happens a lot, or this is a good thing to know if you're making like a button down shirt where you'd need interfacing in the collar or in the cuffs. Any sort of pattern where you're going to have pattern pieces, like a bunch of pattern pieces that need interfacing for that extra stability. The second cool thing I have to share with you is an article that came to me via the Craft Industry Alliance. Gist of the article is the author decided to perform this experiment in which she started every day, instead of consuming, she created. So instead of reaching for her phone and like scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or her email, she purposely like set her phone aside and got up and started sewing. She set like a timer for herself, and she got up and she just ripped off like a few seams, did a couple of steps. She started out her day by making something, and she talked about in the article how it made her feel. Like this had a lasting impact on her mood throughout the day and on her interactions. I think she talks about her interactions with her kiddos. And I just thought that was such a pure and simple and beautiful experiment that is just a real treat for yourself and a real treat for your inner artist. But I love this idea of like unconsciously setting your intention for the day is one of creation instead of being passive. And then finally, I have 2 cool just sewing hack sort of things. The first item is this really nice it's not a tutorial, it's just a, hey, look at this is a good idea, check it out sort of a thing, where you take a little tiny piece of bias and you use it to sew down the end of your zipper on the inside of your garment. A lot of times those, like the very bottom of the zipper will get like all weird and like flappy, I'm talking like that. And it's just like, maybe it doesn't lay flat, maybe it rubs up against your body and it's just annoying. The idea is you sew this little teeny, like the little flappy part of the end of the zipper, like where the bottom, like where the zipper stop is, you sew it down. And there, in this Instagram photo, it just looks so nice and neat and such a nice, like professional touch that I might start doing this, to achieve those pretty guts that sewists so often like to call out. And then the other mini hack is using, this is assuming that your sewing machine has this stitch, using the honeycomb stitch to finish the hems on your knit garments.